Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to CS 199 EMP. My name is Akila, for those of you who have not met me before. Let me share my screen. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Yeah. So for today's topics, we're going to be talking about CSV parsing, which you guys should be pretty familiar with now. I think there was a question on the homework about it and on the practice midterm. So this is going to be a good topic for you to review today before your midterm exam. And then we're going to be covering two new topics, which is Java objects and Java object methods. And so if you've looked at the lesson for today and you might have access to the lesson for tomorrow, that's what you're going to be covering in those two lessons. And let me make sure I'm recording. Yep, recording. Okay. As always, you can follow along on the course website's homepage and use the playground there, or you can use your own REPL wherever you use REPL or something like that. And you can find the slides on our website here. Okay, so first topic, CSV parsing. So in the problem that we worked on Sunday, we worked on a problem where we looked at football data and we used string methods to process that data. So at this point, you should be kind of familiar with all of those string methods: split, substring, trim, equals, index of, char at, etc. And so those are the main things you'll need to use. And then sometimes you might find it helpful to also convert any string data that you have into an integer. And since this is kind of something that everybody's been doing for a while, we'll just jump right into the first practice problem. Actually, let's actually look at a review problem first, and then we'll look at the practice problem. So this is kind of what the CSV looks like. And when you want to parse it by new line, remember that this is how you want to use new line. One call out I want to make here is that some students that I've seen used the forward slash instead of the backward slash, and that caused an error when they were testing out their programs. So if you ever need to use the new line character in your split statement, make sure you use this, forward slash instead of the backward slash. I think I said that correctly, but I always get it confused also, but just keep that in mind. And then you typically will loop through each of the parts of the string here. So when you split, you're getting each of these sections, each of these lines, and then you want to loop through every single line to get each of the individual components and parse them as needed. So you have a general look of a CSV parsing example. Let's take a look at the practice problem. So today's practice problem on CSV parsing is based off of Marvel Avengers. And so the Avengers are having a competition to see who won the most number of fist fights in 2020. And they're storing this information inside of a CSV. So what you need to do is write a function that will take in a string and return a string array with the winner's name and their score. So this is just a one-dimensional array with two things in it, the name and their score. Okay, and so you have certain Avengers who are participating in the competition, and you have others who are not. In the CSV, they're gonna show who is participating by having a yes next to their name. You have to handle the empty string case and the null case appropriately, and you can use integer parse int to go from into a string. And you can use string.value of to go from a string to an int. And then of course there's the typical string methods, the trim and the split and the remove and the substring, etc., that you can use. You can assume that all the participants will have unique scores. So this is kind of the guideline for how to attempt the problem. This is the starter code. So like I said, this is what the CSV looks like. Each line has one Avengers information about it. And the second component of each line tells you whether they're participating. And then the last one shows you their score. You have to figure out which one of the participating Avengers has the highest score and return it in a string array, with the first element of the string array being the name and the second element being their score. So a lot going on here. It combined a lot of different stuff that you did. Yeah, but I think you guys are set up to do well on this problem. Are there any questions before I let you guys get started? Work on it for 10 minutes and then we'll regroup. Okay, I'm assuming there are no questions. Feel free to talk in the chat if you're not feeling up for talking this early in the morning. And I'll let you loose. 10 minutes from now, we'll regroup. So like 6:19. If you finish the problem a little bit earlier, just let me know in the chat and we can regroup a little earlier. All right, so it's 6:19. We'll regroup and kind of walk through the solution. Does anyone have a solution that they want to share? Either in the chat or, talk through it. Okay, looks like we got one person who's interested. Okay. So it looks like you got pretty far, Andrew. Do you want to talk through your solution? Okay. You got an error in your return statement. Yeah. This looks good. Looks like you're on the right track. What I'll do is I'll just go ahead and walk through it on here with everyone so that we can all see it, and then maybe you'll get where your error is coming from, hopefully. If not, I can take a look at your code maybe towards the end of the session or between problems. Okay, so let me copy over the starter code. And all of the starter code should be, you should be able to copy and paste it in. There shouldn't be any errors. From the starter code, okay, that's fine. All right. So the first thing you want to do is you want to create some assert statements to make sure that this fights handles the null case and the empty string case. This fights. Okay. Not equal to string. Okay. And then you want some sort of variable to keep track of the bias for. And also to keep track of the best fighter, essentially. Best fighter. All right, so then the next thing you want to do is loop through fist fights, the string or the CSV. And I just like to keep it straightforward and do like line inside of lines like that. And it looks like we got another participant. Welcome, Morgan. We're working on the first problem, the CSV problem on the slides today. I'm just going through the solution now. Okay, so you want to break down each line of the CSV. So if you've got one line in the CSV, you want to break down each of the components in that one line and check to see if that is the biggest line. I mean, the biggest score for the fighters. So line that split, and you want to split by the comma here. That's what they're using. And okay, now you want to figure out if the participant in this string is actually participating in the fight or in the competition. So you want to check if whether this second thing in here is yes or no. Competition, cool parts. Art style 1. And then I'm going to trim it just to make sure that I'm getting rid of those white spaces around it. So some students had a confusion about this. Trim only removes the white spaces surrounding it on the left and right ends of the string and not really in the middle. If in competition, so if the person is in the competition, I'll check if this is equal to yes. You got a question in the chat? Can we split by comma? Oh, I forgot to split by new line up here, didn't I? Yes, I'm sorry. You should be splitting by new line up here. I just skipped that very important step. Can we split by comma so that we can avoid trim white space? So even if you split by comma, like even if you split by comma, every single one of these things would still have spaces around it. So when you split by comma, you still end up with like Natasha, and then you have yes, but you have the space in front of yes. And so when I check it against this yes, it will return false. But if you remove the trim, then you check the correct two things. Yeah, so I completely skipped this part. My bad. It should be like this. I didn't even say what lines was. The lines should be this photo. This fight split. So you want to split by the new line character. First and foremost, don't be like me and forget that on the midterm or anything. Okay, and then when you get inside of here, you're checking to see if the competition is in yes. If they are, then you need to figure out what their score is. So you want to integer parse it, integer dot parse dot, and I think is what it is. Yeah. Parts, and then you want to get the third element in there, and then you want to get the definitive on that. And then you want to see if that is greater than the highest score. Okay. Okay, so normally you would want to make sure that the highest score is a negative number, because in this case, you know that the score can never be negative, and so you know that when the first time this for loop will run, it will always set the highest score to be the first person who has a score higher than -1. So in the case of the person having 0, it'll set the first person who has that number, who has a score of 0, to be the best fighter. So yeah, it's a good practice to use the negative number first, initialize it to negative, and then it'll automatically just reset the highest score in the for loop. Assuming that a highest score that is a negative number is impossible, which is generally the case, but you always want to make sure that's the case before you do that. So now you want to set the integer, the highest score, to be parse. Is it parse.int? Oh, there's no dot here. Parse int parts to do the terms in. And then you want to set the best fighter again. Best fighter equals parts 0. Okay. And you will also want to make sure that you're trimming the name. So this is where you're getting the name. And this is where you're getting highest score. And then remember that there's always many different ways to do these kinds of problems. Like you could have put this outside of this if statement if you wanted to. You could have put this outside of the if statement if you wanted to, and assigned it to a variable. So a lot of different ways to do this. There's not like one set in stone solution. Okay. At that point, after the for loop completely runs, you'll have gone through every single person in the CSV. You'll have checked to see who has the highest score and assigned it to be highest score, and the best fighter to be who the best fighter is. And so now remember that we used your strict array, so you gotta set it correctly. And you want to set the first thing in the string array to be best fighter. And you want the second thing to be a string version of the score. So two things you could do here. You can use string dot value of and then put in the integer value. And then that will convert your integer into a string. Alternatively, you could have created a variable out here that was the highest score in string form and stored it every time you reset highest score, and then just use that. That's just kind of an alternative way to approach the problem. And now I just return winner. I think that's everything that you need to do. Let's test it and see what happens. Missing semicolon. Okay, telling me that I'm missing some stuff. Part variable parts. What is part supposed to be? No, okay. Should be parts. Parts. Greater than highest score. Oops. We got a parentheses here. Extraneous input. Extra parentheses there. Okay. So it looks like the first one prints out county, the second one prints out 64. In the null case, we get an assertion error automatically. Let's also check for the empty string case. You also get an assertion error there. So looks like everything is working correctly. Yeah, any questions on this before we move on to new topics? Okay, Morgan has told me that she's all good, so we'll keep going. All right, so first, the next topic is Java objects. So if you've gone through the lesson for today, which maybe you guys have, that's what we'll be talking about in this section. Yeah, so objects, you're kind of familiar with them at this point. You've kind of seen them, you kind of haven't. Objects are used all the time in Java and other languages. They're used in object-oriented programming, which is just a fancy way of saying languages that use objects. And objects are just things that basically contain some sort of data and some sort of like methods to access the data. So data plus code is what Wikipedia uses to define Java objects. I like to think of it as somewhere in here. Yeah, state and behavior. You can think of it either way. So data plus code or state and behavior. And the reason we use Java objects often is because there are things outside of like integers and strings, right? Like we have ideas and concepts like classes and students and people and organizations, and we need to be able to represent those things within code, and we need to be able to work with those kinds of higher level concepts, and objects can be really helpful in defining that. And so classes are kind of linked to objects. Classes are kind of like definers of what an object should look like. So classes kind of define objects and the way they behave. And then objects are one particular instance of a class. So if you have a class that defines what a superhero is, the superhero has a name and he has a power and he has like an age, for example, then one instance of a superhero, one example for one object is Ant-Man. Ant-Man is a superhero. He is an instance of the superhero class. He's got a name, he's got a power, and he's got an age. So I hope that kind of clarifies the difference between a class and an object. And from this point on out in the course, you're going to be shifting away from these like primitive types, integers and doubles and yada, 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 and moving towards Java objects and working with Java classes. Okay, and then I want to highlight the syntax here for the class. So you have like the class variable or keyword, and then you have the class name, which is capitalized, and it's got some fancy coloring sometimes. And then you have some curling brackets around it. And then here is the 3 data points that you'll see inside of superhero class. Remember I said that objects contain some data and some code related to the methods. This is the data part. Okay, and this is how you create a new instance of a class. And Professor Talon goes through this kind of more extensively in the lesson. But when you're creating a new instance of the class or you're creating a new object, you call the name of the class. You can name it whatever you want. This is your variable name. Then you call new, and then you have superhero parentheses. So yeah, you'll get familiar with that soon enough. And then if you want to access any of the data points inside of the class, say the name, the power, or the age, you typically use something called dot notation, which you should also be familiar with this at this point, to kind of change those variables, to set those variables, to access those variables going forward. So any questions after that? All right, so we'll keep going. All right, first practice with Java objects. There is no homework for today because of the midterm. So I don't know if you'll have a chance to, if you've had a chance to practice with Java objects. But let's just go ahead and do it in this session. So first, there are 2 kind of problems here. The first problem is creating a class called movie. Just like you did here, or just like we did here with superhero, you create a class called movie that has 3 variables stored inside of it, a title, a studio, and a rating. And I kind of clarified what each of those represents. Your goal is to write down the class, what it looks like, and like code it out, and then show me what you would want to make each of these data points or attributes be. So like we don't say whether this should be a string or an integer. That's kind of up to you to figure out. And then we will also create a class called holiday. And this also has 3 variables. So we can call these data points inside of here fields, field variables, instance variables. Those are just a couple of names for them. So there's a lot of different things they could be called, but we're calling them 3 field variables here, name, day, and month. And then, yeah, that's what you should put inside of your holiday class. And then finally, I would like for you to create an instance of both of these classes using the new keyword, just like we did here with the superhero class, but you can call it whatever you want. Just create your own new movie and new holiday. So you're going to create 2 classes, and then you're going to create 2 new objects with those classes. All right, so 10 minutes we'll after that. And just let me know in the chat if you guys finish the problems a little early. I know these are a little bit simpler. So Just to make it a little bit easier, I've opened up the previous slide here so you guys can kind of use this as an example. Okay, so we got 2 people finished. I'll give it another minute. Okay, so it looks like everyone's finished. Great, great, great. All right, let's go through the problem. It looks like Andrew's shared his solution. I think this looks right, Andrew. Don't see any issues with it. Okay, so roll with the this is the class movie. Movie has whoops. Movie has it's a string called title. Got a string called studio. And it's got an integer called rating. Oops. Okay. So let's go ahead and create an instance of the movie. We'll call it movie one. New movie. And you can just set movie one title to be something. Movie one plot video to be another something, and then movie one dot rating to be. But I'm not going to write those out because it seems like everyone's got the hang of it. Okay. So what does the class holiday look like? You got the string name, int day. So you might have noticed that they're looking for an int in the day section. And then a string. And same thing here for how you want to create holiday. Holiday, we'll just call that. Just call it holiday one. Equals new holiday. Okay, and then you can set holiday one's attributes to be like same as before. Use the dot notation, something to this effect. So I won't go through the rest of it, just because it's kind of straightforward and the solutions are way better. Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to Java object methods. Hold on to your solutions for this, since you're going to be kind of building off of it for the next question. So I mentioned before that objects encapsulate state and behavior, and this is just a thing to always know for maybe a quiz question later on down the road. State, behavior, or data or code, data and code is typically how you want to think about it. So we talked about the data through these fields right here, but then how do we show the behavior of the class? So we can do that using instance methods. And an example is given here of an instance method. You can print out something about the superhero. So in this case, we're printing out the name, the name's age is age. But what's kind of unusual about this is that you don't pass in name or age into print, you don't have to pass it in, because what's special about this class superhero is that it has access to all of these instance variables automatically. Name and age are just accessed by all of the instance methods automatically, and you don't have to pass them in as arguments in order to access them. And this is true for all of the instance methods in a class. Okay, so instance methods, high level overview, done. Any questions on them? We're going to be creating 3 new instance methods for both the movie class and the holiday class. So instance methods look pretty much exactly like your typical function or method that you've been functions that you've been writing all along. They're just called methods here, instance methods here, because they belong to an instance of the class. And the distinguishing factor, at least the way I think about between functions and methods, is methods are part of a class and functions kind of stand alone and they don't necessarily have to be part of a class. So yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and do the practice because we're kind of short on time. But the question is continue with the movie class that we had before. So I shouldn't have deleted what I had. Um, Continue with the movie class and create an instance if you haven't already, which most of you have, but add 3 new instance methods. The first one is void set rating. So set rating should take in an integer num and set the rating attribute, reset the rating attribute. But it shouldn't return anything. And then make sure that you have assert statements in there to make sure that the rating is between 0 and 100. Next is you have to create a get studio method, which returns a string, but it doesn't take anything in as an argument. So that should just return the studio element. And then finally, you'll have a print statement that will print out something like movie was produced by XYZ studio or Studio XYZ and has a rating of blank on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, so those are the 3 functions you'll to create for movie. Let's go ahead and do this for maybe a couple of minutes, and then we'll go on to the holiday class, and then there's a similar set of functions for that. So go ahead and get started in the movie one, and I will give us some time to go through that, and then maybe you guys can maybe work on the holiday class in your own time because it's kind of similar. I think it'll be good. Okay, yeah. As always, let me know in the chat if you finish early, if you have questions, etc. As you guys finish up, let me know in the chat. We can start reviewing. Okay, so it looks like everyone's finished at this point. So we will go ahead and start reviewing. Okay. So get set rating. I've already defined what the function's kind of skeleton looks like. All three instance methods go inside of the class. If it wasn't part of the class, you would put it outside. So for set rating, what do you have to do? So make sure you set asserts, make sure that the new rating that you get is indeed greater than 100. And make sure you assert that the new rating you get is less than or equal to 0. And then you can just reset rating to be the new rating, okay? So I get people get confused with this all the time. Make sure that what you're like assigning to is on the left side and what your new value is going to be on the right side. And then assert statements, make sure that they're what you're asserting is what you want to be true. Okay, and then get studio, you just a simple one-liner return statement. Print is out print when, and I'm just going to copy and paste from the solution because it's a little bit long and I don't feel like typing it like that. The title was produced by Studio and has a rating of like on Rotten Tomatoes. Yep, so that is a completed movie class right here. We've got all the data points here. We've got all the methods here. And this is how you call a new instance of it. And you can, of course, set each of these instances using dot location. And you can also call each of these methods. So if you want to call the print method, for example, which is going to give you an error because I didn't define studio or rating, but you can just call it by using the instance variable's name, the object's name, and then doing dot print essentially. So yeah, a lot of stuff we covered today. There's a similar example for holidays, and you guys can kind of work through that on your own, the solutions at the end of the slides. Highly recommend that if you wanted to get familiar with classes, then this is a good practice to do. But that's it for today. I know it's 7:01, end of the hour. You did a lot of stuff today. Good luck on your midterm, and I know you're going to do great. Leave some feedback if you have any. Thanks for stopping by, guys. If you have questions, let me know. I'll stick around for a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for coming.